Gustavo is a journalist and founder of the Brazilian Report. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So get us up to speed. Where do things stand with Brazil's vaccine trials and the efficacy against this P1 variant?
Well, we have studies showing that the Chinese CoronaVac is 50% or so effective against the P1, which is similar to tests in the first clinical trial. So that has been encouraging for health ministry officials. The problem now is to get these vaccines rolled out. Brazil has stuttered with that. We have around 24 million Brazilians which have been vaccinated so far from a 211 million population, and several state capitals have already suspended rollouts in these past few days because of a lack of inputs and doses.
So then what's been driving the increase that we've been seeing in cases in Brazil at the moment?
Well, it's a mix of a slow vaccination rollout, but also with the fact that people are not observing social distancing anymore and people are not staying home and staying safe. And that is because, one, millions and millions of people are forced to get out and to work because they don't have income anymore. And the government handout program that kept many households afloat in 2020 expired in December and was only reset last week. So for 3 months, several families had no steady income and had to get out and fight for make ends meet. And then there's also the factor that pandemic fatigue is a big reality in Brazil, and a lot of people who could stay home simply won't stay home.
And we are seeing that despite the spike in cases, restrictions on movement are being eased in Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro. State schools, bars, sporting venues, etc. will reopen. So what's the justification for going ahead with reopening at this point?
Well, the thing is, these measures are extremely unpopular in Brazil, and the federal government, personified by President Jair Bolsonaro, has bashed these kind of moves and say that these are the moves that are causing unemployment to a record high and who are putting a sort of economic chokehold on millions of poor households. So governors and mayors try to balance the necessity of these measures with keeping enough support to make their administrations viable. And at this point, in São Paulo, for instance, where I am, we still have restrictions on non-essential businesses, but some of the restrictions that were in place in essential business have been relaxed against what most experts say. But at this point, there's no way of putting a lockdown in Brazil, because a country as big as Brazil, you need a lot of public buy-in in order to have this kind of measure working out. São Paulo recently enacted a 10-day holiday, and isolation rates never went above 50%, while the goal was 75%.
So then how has President Bolsonaro responded to what's been said about his handling of the crisis, and how is this being received by Brazilians?
Well, President Jair Bolsonaro has changed a little bit his stance on the vaccine. He was anti-vaccine, but once popular support rallied around vaccine and politicians who tried to get them rolled out, he changed his tune in the past month or so, but he's still adamantly against any sort of lockdown-like measure. His approval rates are dipping, also because the fact that economic conditions in Brazil have deteriorated a lot, and the fact that the pandemic is raging out of control is costing him support also in previous strongholds of his, like wealthier segments of society and the richer portions of the country as São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. But he continues he is consistent in his skepticism of COVID-19. Now he finds himself somewhat surrounded with Congress moving on to probe the government's pandemic response. So it remains to be seen if that kind of pressure will change his posture of we will continue to see simply the same tune we have for the past year or so.
Now, I do just quickly want to bring up some of the concerns we're seeing about a twin crisis developing with hunger and food insecurity emerging. Tell us just quickly, how is that being managed and addressed?
Well, a lot of families are simply depending on donations from church communities, from volunteers. But until last week, for 3 months, There was no government handout, so that really stressed the economic needs of a big portion of the population. And now there is one handout that has been starting to be paid last week, but for a person without any income, these handouts are not sufficient to lift them above the extreme poverty line of $1.90 a day.
Goodness, well,